Hi, my name's Ram Velga. I run the switching and routing team in Broadcom. Um, you know, in this discussion about disaggregation, right? A couple of things I just want to bring to your attention. Not long ago, if you tried to procure about 128 ports of 100 gig, 128 ports of 100 gig, you'd be probably paying about $1 million in capex to an OEM. Okay, and the amount of power that box would consume was about 10 kilowatts. Okay, and it pretty much took up half a rack of space. Today, with what's happening in silicon, you can do the same 128 ports of 100 gig, and we would be lucky if we got 10 to $20,000 per that switch hardware in the marketplace. So think about it. You're going from an equipment that not long ago cost about $1 million, now in the range of 10 to $20,000, right? And then when you think about it in the context of power, you're going from something that consumed 10 kilowatts of power to something now that consumes less than 1,000 watts of power. So the role that Broadcom plays in this idea of disaggregation is that we are a very, very firm believer that bandwidth is continuing to grow significantly, right? And especially when you think about it, I'll give you another context for this. If you try to buy a traditional server, you would have 50 gigs of a NIC coming out of it. Today, if you buy a GPU, the backend of that GPU will have at least 400 gigs of bandwidth coming out of it, and soon shipping with 800 gigs. But there's also something called a scale up that is attached to the GPU that's going to be about 10 terabits of bandwidth. So think about this. If you bought a traditional server, it's 50 gigs of bandwidth. If you connect the back end of a GPU, it could be anywhere from 400 gigs to 10 terabits per GPU, right? So when we are actually building hardware for that kind of scale, and we take the key IP from there and bring it into the service provider network, what we are able to provide is completely change the economics of this business. And that's where the role that we play is being able to provide the hardware that absolutely changes the economics of this business. Now, obviously, this hardware on its own cannot do much, and that's where I will give it to Hillel to talk about how their software really brings all of this together. And one last point on this, back in 2015, we were already at least 5 years into this journey of disaggregation with the cloud guys, the big cloud guys, whether, I won't take their names here. But then AT&T came to us in 2015 and said, hey, look, what you're doing with the cloud is very different economics than what today AT&T is used to in terms of the equipment that they're procuring from the OEMs. And they said, look, we want to be on the same, price, per bandwidth curve that the cloud guys are on, because otherwise, if we are competing with them, we know we don't have the cost structure to be able to play in that space. So we said, okay, we can build the silicon, but we need AT&T to tell us exactly what features you need. So over multiple years, they sat down with us and they actually told us exactly what features they need, and we built the silicon to the features that they asked for. Okay. But then they also had the foresight to say, hey, look, just the silicon's not sufficient. You need somebody who builds the hardware for it. And then they, had partners like Eufy Space that come in that built the hardware to it. But they also realized eventually you need the software. There was some discussion about using something like Sonic. Yes, you can, but obviously that's something that you can use in use cases towards the edge. But they wanted to do it from the core of their network, and you needed somebody to be able to actually write this software from scratch that is able to scale. And they went and partnered very closely with DriveNets back in 2015, 2016 to build what it is possible today. And I can tell you back then, most people would have told us this is not going to be successful, right?
Right.
But to be where we are today, where 80% plus of an 800 plus petabytes of traffic per year is happening, sorry, my apologies, day per day is happening, that's because of the vision at AT&T, but more, and along with it, the execution from DriveNets, right? Broadcom was doing what they were doing. We are okay with it, but then obviously the help from Vincent at Eufy Space. So we're very thankful for you guys, and I actually think the rest of the telco industry has a lot to be thankful for these guys who led this effort here and were trailblazing. A lot of these guys would have been fired if this thing did not happen back
Right.
then. So thank you guys. We very much appreciate you taking the first step forward.